Everyone, back to STATEC Researchers Seminar Series on Measuring Progress and Well-Being. I'm Kelsey O'Connor, one of the organizers. Today, we are pleased to welcome Gabriella De Bernardo, who will discuss efficiency and well-being and progress towards the SDGs. But before getting started, I would like to share a little information about our annual workshop. The second Measuring Progress workshop will take place from the 6th to the 7th of June 2024. Koen de Kank and Tessa Peasgood will serve as keynote speakers. If you don't know them well, they both have extensive experience in measuring quality of life. The abstract deadline is coming up quickly. Please submit your abstracts by the 18th of February. And back to today, Gabrielle will speak for approximately 40 minutes and then address questions at the end, at which time please raise your virtual hands or post your questions in the chat. If in the meantime you have an important clarifying question, please feel free to speak. During the presentation, actually, it'd be great if you could turn your video off. We're trying to conserve bandwidth. And then you can turn your video back on during the Q&A session. Also, please keep your microphones muted. This helps us focus on the presentation. And a last reminder, we are recording the event. You'll be able to find this and past recordings on our website and on our YouTube channel. Now to introduce Gabriella De Bernardo. Gabriella is a PhD student in economics, statistics, and sustainability at the University of Naples, Parthenope. Her research focuses on the measurement of well-being and indicators that go beyond GDP, with a focus on the sustainability of countries' well-being. In much of her work, she uses data envelopment analysis to rank countries on the basis of their efficiency, especially in the production of well-being. And as you may know, at STATEC Research, we conduct some research using data envelopment analysis, so I'm very much looking forward to Gabriella's insight. Without further ado, we are pleased to welcome Gabriella De Bernardo. Gabriella, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cassie. May I just precise that I'll be in full screen mode, so if you have some question during my presentation, please feel free to interrupt me because I could not see your hands virtual angle. There's something here.
So do you want to go full screen?
Okay, yeah, I'm going.
Yeah, great.
So good afternoon to everyone. I'm going to introduce my work published on the International Review of Economics, co-authored with my academic advisors during my PhD. So we know that gross domestic product has traditionally been the central indicator of a society's living conditions and the most widely established measure of a nation's economic performance and policy. Surely its widespread use is due to its simplicity, being the ordinary income-based measure that allows cross-country comparisons, and to its relationship with some aspects of living conditions. But GDP fails to take into account many issues, among whom there are socioeconomic and environmental costs, which are challenges that every country is facing today in the journey towards a sustainable development trend. This limit of GDP highlights the inconsistency between the growth of a country, measured by the value of GDP itself and merely quantitative indicators in general, and the real living conditions of people. The concept of well-being has emerged as a viable alternative to GDP, but its measurement poses important challenges due to its multidimensional nature. This multidimensionality causes two challenges. First, in the transition from GDP to a measure of well-being. First of all, it is needed the definition, the adoption of a specific definition of well-being to guide the selection of appropriate variables for the measurement of well-being. Second, it is needed a weighting scheme for the dimension of well-being, which is a complex task preferring objective criteria over subjective judgments. Since 1960s, literature has tried to quantify the concept of well-being through a multidimensional approach, but many existing well-being measures primarily focus on present well-being, so disregarding its sustainability and future implications. Regarding the first issue, that is the choice of a specific definition of the phenomenon we want to measure, we want to start from the definition of well-being provided by OECD. OECD describes well-being with three domains: material living conditions, determining people's consumption and their command over resources; quality of life, that is a non-monetary domain of well-being that shapes people's life opportunities and chances; and subjective well-being, which expresses people's perceptions of their life experience. We want to measure if the country's way of producing well-being is sustainable and to what extent. A fundamental question to answer in order to label a development trend as sustainable or not is whether it can continue in the future. That being so, a way of producing well-being is sustainable if it is also efficient. Economically speaking, technical efficiency is achieved when the overall well-being cannot be increased without modifying the ratio between the goals in terms of well-being reached and the means used. In other words, it is an equilibrium point because it is the degree to which the actual output of a production unit approaches its maximum. Social efficiency instead implies that all private and external costs and benefits are considered when producing well-being. So we can say that an efficient allocation of resources can make well-being sustainable and durable over time, satisfying the citizen needs, which in turn allow well-being to be improved in the various life domains. So the aim is to build a novel indicator of well-being in terms of efficiency and consequently sustainability. More precisely, we propose an assessment of the efficiency in the production of well-being in OECD countries using data envelopment analysis. The choice of the method of data envelopment analysis is our answer to address the second issue, that is the choice of a proper weighting scheme for the dimensions of well-being. Data envelopment analysis is a non-parametric linear programming model using for optimizing and ranking decision-making units whose production process shows a structure of multiple inputs and outputs. It is an approach for evaluating the performance of units when converting multiple inputs into outputs. This method measures the efficiency of each unit by its distance from the production frontier, which is represented by the best practice units. It is widely believed that the productive base of economies, consisting of a variety of capital assets and social infrastructures, determines well-being. So, countries' productive resources are reasonably considered as inputs to achieve well-being. Since the primary objective of an economic system is to enhance well-being through the production and the consumption of goods and services, here we want to measure the efficiency of countries in the transformation of traditional resources, here labor and capital, into well-being. DEA will allow the identification of the relative efficient units and the measurement of the extent of the inefficiency of other units compared to the best performers. DEA provides an efficiency score between 0 and 1, where relative efficient units are identified by a score equal to 1, while the difference between 1 and the score of inefficient units measures the extent of the inefficiency and the possible improvement in terms of proportional reduction of all inputs and proportional increases of all outputs. Besides, using the super-efficiency DEA, it is possible to rank the efficient units too. Even if they all have an efficiency score equal to 1, the rankings that will be proposed will not present the efficient units randomly, but they will be ranked from the best performer to the worst one. DEA is particularly suitable for social indicators, presenting considerable advantages. First, as a non-parametric model, it is based on few assumptions. Second, it provides ratings in terms of relative efficiency. So the production units are not compared with an ideal one, but the reference system is built based on the sample data. Third, no probabilistic hypotheses are made on the data collection methodology, as DEA is a descriptive and non-inferential method. But the advantage that most justify the choice of this method lies in the fact that DEA does not require setting a priori an order of importance among the variables to reach the efficient frontier, but it builds it empirically, basing on the sample data. Through this method, larger weights are given to the elementary indicators where each country performs well. So the core idea is that a good relative score of a country on an individual indicator shows that it considers that indicator as relatively important. Finally, it is needed to point out that this methodology for the indicators construction ensures comparability across units and over time. DEA characterizes the performance of decision-making units in two ways: input orientation, so considering the minimization of inputs for a given level of outputs, and output orientation, considering the maximization of outputs for a given level of inputs. Efficiency can also depend on returns to scale, which can be constant or variable. In our case, we will use a variable returns to scale to take into account the heterogeneity of countries belonging to our sample. And DEA scores reflect proportional increases of outputs and proportional decreases of inputs, suggesting the proportional maximum input reduction rate or the maximum output expansion rate that is common to all inputs or all outputs. The OECD has actively led the research seeking an alternative measure of well-being. Its most effective initiative was the launch of the OECD Better Life Initiative. Thanks to this, the organization identified 11 dimensions as essentials for well-being, measured by 24 elementary variables that quantify the different aspects of well-being. Considering the OECD Better Life Index as the closest indicator to the concept of well-being we embrace, we use its variables for the analysis that will follow. The Better Life Index is a set of 11 indicators of well-being, where each individual indicator corresponds to a key topic that is essential to well-being. The choices regarding the aggregation of the indicators corresponding to the 11 dimensions are left to the users of the dataset. In fact, the OECD website allows users to create their own Better Life Index, which they call Your Better Life Index, by choosing the weights for each dimension, ranking them from the most to the least important. The aim of an indicator of efficiency of well-being is achieved through three steps that we will see in detail. In the first step, DEA is implemented by using the sub-indexes of the 11 dimensions that make up the Better Life Index as output variables and a unit vector as input variable. This expedient of the unit vector allows DEA to assign empirical weights to the 11 dimensions under condition of equal resources used. So the result is what we call our Better Life Index. That is an index that comes from the aggregation of the dimensions of well-being thanks to an empirical weighting system, and that measures the well-being provided by OECD countries under conditions of equal resources used. At this stage, 15 countries achieved the maximum score, including the countries of Northern Europe, which notoriously guarantee their citizens a high level of well-being. So they don't just provide their citizens with a high level of well-being, but also produce it efficiently. Interest findings come from the comparison between the ranking of our Better Life Index and the ranking of the Better Life Index built on the website, attributing equal weights to each dimension. This comparison provides an evidence in favor of the importance of the reasonings underneath the construction of an indicator of well-being, and particularly on the weighting scheme. The top and the bottom performer are quite the same, but their ranks change.
Gabriella, if I can ask you, you're going through it now, perhaps. I just want to understand the index you come up with. So the empirical weighting is coming from the DEA. So it's a non-parametric set of weights to the 11 dimensions. Is that, and then which years are you using?
I'm using the last available year, that is, in this case, the 2018.
2018. Okay, and the weights on the various dimensions range from, I don't know, 0.05 up to 0.5, just as an example. Do you have any idea? Does your result, part of what I'm thinking is sometimes you would have equal weights on each dimension, and how different your result is from that. Is it dramatically different, or do you understand my question?
Do you mean just the weights are dramatically different from my weights, or the whole index?
Yeah, I'm basically trying to provide, in my mind, a little intuition on what comes from the DEA. And so if your weights on each dimension are very different from, let's say, equal,
Actually, I didn't focus. Okay, I didn't focus on the weights. It is an output that DEA, of course, provides, but I focused on the final in the indicator obtained through the aggregation of the dimensions thanks to these weights. Later, I present just a correlation analysis between the results obtained through equal weights and through this Better Life Index obtained through empirical weights. But it's just to understand how the results change.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. That's helpful. And we have another question from Panagiatis.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Not so good, actually.
Can you hear me well now?
If you just speak up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had some issues with my microphone. If you can hear me well now, it's not a question, it's just to provide maybe an answer to the host Kelsey's question. So how does DA work? Basically, in terms of this composite index approach, the weights are not equal, as you suggest, and they can differ dramatically from equal weights. The essence is that what DA tries to do in this context is to allow each different country to have the benefit of the doubt in order to assigning the weighting scheme. So each country can select the weights in the most favorable way possible. So assign higher weights to indicators it does better out of these 11 indicators, lower weights to indicators that it does worse, and even neglect some indicators, like put a 0 weight to them if this is possible by the analysis. And this provides a most favorable assessment of the country in terms of the Better Life indicator. I think that may clarify a little bit the situation. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, Cassie, if it's clearer now.
No worries. I think that's between the two of you very helpful, and I didn't want to distract too much just now. So thank you. You can continue.
Okay, so in the second step, the Better Life Index variables are used to assess the technical efficiency of OECD countries in the production of their own well-being, using labor and capital as inputs of the production process. In other words, The goal is to measure if countries are efficiently using their traditional resources to produce well-being for their citizens. The 24 indicators contained in the 11 dimensions of the Better Life Index represent the output of the well-being production process. However, among them, there are 6 variables that represent socioeconomic and environmental costs. These are the so-called bad outputs and are cut out from the output metrics in this step because they represent undesirable outputs, and consequently, there is no interest in their possible growth or maximization. But DEA can lose its discriminatory power if the number of the variables is too large with respect to the number of observations. And that's why the output matrix, being still too large, is reduced through a principal component analysis, retaining the first 4 components, who explain the 80% of the original variance. I don't know if someone is trying to speak. Okay. So the input data are given by capital and labor in the form of annual consumption of fixed capital and labor in the form of hours worked in a year for each employee. The choice of consumption of fixed capital instead of the stock capital allows to consider the input that is actually used instead of the input just existing. And this choice answers the need of sustainability. Hopefully, the disposable resources should not be consumed as a whole. And the analysis is performed both input-oriented and output-oriented. The analysis of technical efficiency is proof that reporting a high level of well-being does not mean producing it efficiently. 5 OECD countries in this step result to be technically efficient, both for the input and output orientation. These are the UK, Ireland, Luxembourg, New Zealand, and the United States. Other countries whose citizens declare a good level of well-being and whose our Better Life Index itself in the previous step assumed the maximum value are not technically efficient in producing that level of well-being. Developing countries instead, which do not report high levels of well-being, improve their performance when the resources used in the production process are considered, confirming that these countries pay close attention to the exploitation of traditional productive resources because of their shortage. In other words, they use fewer resources than developed countries, but they try to get the best out of this. In the third step, we've tried to answer a question. How much does well-being cost, socially speaking? To do this, the previous input matrix is replaced with a new matrix involving socioeconomic and environmental costs in order to calculate an indicator of social efficiency. In particular, we used bad outputs excluded from the previous analysis as inputs to measure the social efficiency of the countries of the sample. So here we are assessing the efficiency in the exploitation of socioeconomic and environmental costs to produce well-being. As in the technical efficiency analysis, the output matrix is reduced through a principal component analysis, retaining the first 4 components, representing the 80% of the initial variance. Socially efficient countries, even by producing a certain level of pollution and social issues, are able to minimize them given their level of well-being, or maximize the level of well-being given the level of these issues. This time, the number of efficient countries is higher, but there are fundamental observations we can highlight. First, from this ranking, it is possible to infer that there is no correlation between the income level and the score of OECD countries. If it's true that the highest ranks are occupied by countries that are notoriously rich and that provide their citizens with a good quality of life, not all of them have an index score equal to 1, representing the full social efficiency. See, for example, Finland and Denmark. Many countries that report low income levels, low well-being, and are in the lowest ranks for technical efficiency also show much lower scores of social efficiency than those of technical efficiency. So it appears that social efficiency is a prerogative of developed countries. Of course, the absence of a relationship between the income level and well-being is still true, but in general, developing countries have much more struggles than the others, and their results in well-being analysis are the worst. Here, a comparison is proposed between the set of indicators resulting from the previous step of the analysis with the two new indicators. In particular, we compare the indicators obtained in our 3 steps, so our Better Life Index, the technical efficiency indicators, both input and output oriented, and the social efficiency indicators, both input and output oriented, plus 2 other indicators computed with the subjective weights. One is the OECD Better Life Index with equal weights, assigning the same weight to every dimension of well-being. And the other is the OECD Better Life Index with the weighted mean. The weighted mean is the indicator obtained using subjective weights. More precisely, from the OECD website, it is possible to collect data on users' responses. The weights resulting from the preferences of each of the OECD countries' residents are used to build the weighting scheme for the 11 dimensions. By doing this, each country has its own weighting scheme based on the preferences expressed by its citizens. The resulting indicator is a Better Life Index reflecting the ranking of the OECD countries' inhabitants in terms of well-being dimensions. The comparisons are made in terms of correlation to explore the consistency between all these indicators. We can see that the correlations between the technical and social efficiency DEA scores show a weak relationship, stressing out that technical efficient countries are not necessarily socially efficient and vice versa. The medium-low levels of correlation between our Better Life Index and the technical efficiency indicators show how the scores change when the assumption of equality of resources used is dropped and the actual levels of inputs are considered. The medium levels of correlations between our Better Life Index and social efficiency indicators show some substantial differences in rankings as they reflect different aspects of the same phenomenon. The low levels of correlation of GDP with most of efficiency indicators are consistent with our expectations that well-being is not a purely quantitative concept. However, the higher correlation of GDP with our Better Life Index and with the social efficiency indicator with input orientation may be explained in light of the economic theory according to which in the early stages of the development process, an increase in the level of GDP can increase well-being too, and only when certain levels of development are reached, a further increase in GDP does not necessarily produce an increase in well-being. The low to medium correlations between the OECD Better Life Index with equal weights and the others, except for our Better Life Index, show the difference between the use of an empirical weighting scheme and an equal weighting system. The higher correlation
Sorry,
between...
Gabriella, to interrupt you. I just have a question about the weighting scheme. I think, so in some way, if we change the weighting scheme, that the ranking that you show us across country then changes, no? So should be the weighting defined in some, I don't know, like there has to be a way to compute them. So is that part of the process in some way? Because in some way you want to have them computed empirically in order to have a better efficiency and better ranking, no? Rather than, I mean, it should be up to discussion as well how you actually compute the weight, because in this way it's very discretionary, no?
Yeah, it is. I mean, here we're just proposing a way to calculate empirical weights because we're demonstrating, we're showing that the situation is quite different between the subjective weights and when using empirical weights.
Yeah. Okay. But those empirical weights, how they are defined? So you use DEA to compute them as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So
that's the point. That's the reason why we choose DEA, just because we don't have to choose weighting scheme for the dimensions, but it is the method that calculates it basing on the sample data.
Yeah, and these
that's
allow
what we mean by empirically.
Yeah, I see. And so with the idea that those empirical one are the one that actually guarantee you the best efficiency, no, in the end.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I mean, the best efficiency, but just because some of the units of the sample must be rated as efficient in order to evaluate the relative inefficiency of the others.
Okay.
I don't know if it's clear.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah,
I just think this weighting thing is really relevant in some way because as you were saying, it's interesting the comparison with the one that are taken from the people perception, or that's really relevant. But in some way, maybe I personally assign to certain dimension more weights than others, but this doesn't mean that then in the discussion then we need to account for the weighting system that allows you to get the better results in the end, empirically rather than subjectively. But I think it's very interesting, the comparison between the different results that you get. So I think the weighting scheme thing is really interesting aspect to discuss, because that changed the results, according to how you weight each dimension, that changed the ranking of the country.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it's also something I want to focus on, because I think it's really relevant that this huge difference between empirical weights and subjective weights, that is also there is also a long debate in literature about this in the construction of well-being indicators.
Okay, thanks, Gabriella.
Thanks to you. So just some other observations. I was saying that the higher correlation between our Better Life Index and the OECD Better Life Index built up with equal weights may be a consequence of the DEA results that assign similar empirical weights to the Better Life Index dimensions when productive resources are not taken into account. And finally, the correlation between the OECD Better Life Index with the weighted mean and the rest of indicators show the differences between the subjective weighting system derived from the preferences of the OECD countries' residents and the objective weighting system resulting from DEA. The almost perfect positive correlation between the OECD Better Life Index weighted mean and the OECD Better Life Index with equal weights tells us that users consider monetary dimensions, such as income and jobs, as important as the others. This finding is perfectly in line with our initial idea that well-being is a multidimensional phenomenon and cannot be measured only through GDP or, in general, monetary indicators, but it requires a set of indicators able to picture the whole quality of life of people in its multiple aspects. we can conclude that two trends are clear. First, technical efficiency and social efficiency are not linked to each other, but they are not incompatible. In fact, the 5 countries that were found to be technically efficient are also socially efficient. Second, some developing countries reach much lower scores for social than technical efficiency, confirming the economic theory according to which environmental and social issues are generally a prerogative of developed countries that have already achieved a certain level of technical efficiency and can afford to neglect it in favor of social struggles. In general, the developing countries focus on efficient exploitation of productive resources, while the productive process of the richest countries, on average, has fewer social and environmental impacts. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Gabriella. We've already had a couple of questions or a couple of comments, but now is the time to expand the discussion. Please feel free to either raise your hand or write in the chat. Maybe just to start off, Gabriella, with clarifying, do you have a list of the 11 OECD dimensions? And it'd be nice to see the good and the bad ones, just to relate to this a little more.
I can show you from the paper.
Sure. One thing that I struggle with is explaining efficiency across countries. And I know that there are some limitations with the DEA approach, but then looking at these may add some qualitative information. I'm kind of moving into a second question. One thought is, by looking at the economic, at the bad, the OECD bads, is that they could be related to environmental conditions. And we've moved, let's say, a lot of the manufacturing to less developed countries. So maybe it's these countries are producing more environmental, or they have a larger carbon footprint per, well-being use per input. That's one idea. But more broadly, what I'm interested in is two things. One, show us the OECD bads, because I think it'd be interesting, but then also how to explain efficiency across countries. If you can rotate that, I think that'll help us.
Yes, I mean, it's just efficiency across country. I mean, comparison between the efficiency of countries.
Yeah. So we have relative efficiency scores, and so why are the, you said, I think with the social efficiency, it's the less developed countries are less socially efficient. But more generally, it'd be interesting to know how do we get to become more efficient?
Luckily, fortunately, DEA also provides some values that I don't want it to be too technical, because I don't know if everybody's familiar with this methodology, but they also provide some values that are called SLAC values, that are a specific reduction of inputs or a specific improvements of outputs that and country can interview on them specifically in order to achieve to improve their efficiency score.
Okay.
So they also provide a lot of information about policy implication in that case, but it would be really specific in that case.
Really specific to a particular country or to a particular input, or
no, I mean really specific in this field, in this seminar, because we had to to start a discussion on SLAC values and how DEA works and all the methodology.
Okay. Yes, I understood.
Before I
rotate this.
I just wanted to show you the this table.
Yep.
Do you know how to rotate the PDF?
On the bottom right, you have a button there for rotate.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. So material living conditions, quality of life.
The bad outputs were these indicators excluded, the one in the column indicators excluded, dwelling without basic facilities belonging to the dimension of housing, job security, that is the expected loss of earnings when someone becomes unemployed, the long-term unemployment rate, air pollution, the homicide rate, and employees working very long hours.
Okay, so we have
are the 6 bad outputs.
So we have labor conditions, we have crime, air pollution, and housing, I think. All right, and we can let Panagiatis go.
Thank you again. I hope you hear me better now.
Yeah, really better.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation, Gabriella. Let me just introduce myself. I am Panagiotis Ravanos. I am a policy analyst at the European Commission's Joint Research Center, and a lot of my research focuses on DEA. Thank you for giving us a very, very interesting talk. I would like to start with an explanation, possibly for Kelsey. You asked Kelsey about how do these countries get more efficient? So what's in this DA for these countries that are not efficient? How can they become efficient? One other aspect of the information provided by this model is that for each country that is not efficient, it can get an indication of which countries on the frontier make up its efficient target. So it does not only get an information on how far are you from being efficient, but also which countries with a similar mix of inputs and outputs constitute your efficient target. So let's say for a country A, we could have countries B and C. So country A gets this information and can use it to mimic, let's say, the operations of countries B and C in order to improve itself. I don't know if this is helpful.
That makes sense. It's a qualitative what you just described. So we can't do much quantitatively to, let's say, diagnose the efficiency scores without the slack variables or the slack.
No. This is a qualitative in the sense that it gives you the information of which are these countries, but it also serves as a quantitative target because the score itself, let's say 0.8, basically tells you that if you reduce your input usage by 20%, you will reach the frontier. Or in the other hand, if you invert the score, if you increase your output usage by, I think, 25%, you will also reach the frontier. So it serves as a quantitative information that a radial or an equiproportionate increase or decrease in the inputs, or increase in the outputs or decrease in the inputs, can get you into the frontier. So it provides you with a route of equiproportionate changes, and also of qualitative information, as you mentioned, about what countries you could look up to as examples.
If I may, what you just described is changing the outputs or the inputs, but conditional on, so let's say we want to increase well-being, conditional on the current level of inputs. And then, so that's not obvious, right? So you have to increase your efficiency somehow. So there's behind this, if I understand correctly, you guys can tell me, there's an idea of a technology behind producing well-being. And that is nebulous, right? And the DEA, right, is also non-parametric. So we don't really know what it takes to, what efficiency means, or what the production function looks like. And so if I understood correctly, right, we can change the inputs. We can say reduce the amount of inputs, but then leave well-being unchanged. That seems rather unintuitive, right? We don't know how to do that. We have to affect efficiency somehow in order to do that. We have to improve the production technology. So how do we do that?
Do you hear me? Can I say something?
Go ahead, Golan.
So I think what thanks a lot for the very interesting talk. So I think what was in the beginning, you touched a little bit the concept of input oriented or output oriented, and I think coming back to the comments other just mentioned is it's important to know the direction that, of an inefficient country which wants in which direction wants to move towards the frontier. Reducing the input, keeping the output the same, or increasing the output and reducing input at the same time. And that also is very important for assigning weights to the countries, right?
Yeah, sure.
So could you please tell us, first of all, did you choose input-oriented, output-oriented, or both of them at the same time?
Both of them. In fact, I presented both the results. Just a moment, I will go back to the slide. Here I propose,
okay.
I don't know if you can see.
It was little small, that's why perhaps I missed it.
Yeah, I know, but...
Yeah, input-oriented, output-oriented, okay.
Yeah, I performed both the input and output orientation.
And did you find any country which is like considerably different? You get different ranking in terms of the efficiency when you change between input oriented and output oriented?
Not considerably. They're quite the same. There are just one country is efficient in the input orientation and not in the output orientation. That is the Netherlands. In the input orientation, it is fully efficient with an efficiency score of 1. In the social efficiency, we're talking about social efficiency now, while it has a social efficiency score of 0.48. So it is way inefficient in this case.
And did you also try the approach between these two when you go, when your, for example, directional distance function has 45 degree or 60 degree or something in between? So you are trying to reduce the inputs and increase output at the same time. Did you try, do you have anything to share with us?
No, actually I don't in this case.
Is there a reason for that, or it was just your choice?
No, it was just a choice to try both the orientation and see the difference in this case. Or also in the technical efficiency, we performed both the orientation just to look at the differences.
I see. Thank you very much.
Because theoretically, thanks to you, because theoretically, we can be interested both in reducing the inputs and retain that level of well-being, but also improve the level of well-being, retaining this level of inputs. I mean, it depends on countries and on governments what they could act on in the certain moment of the certain time.
And my very last question, do you see a pattern? Do you see a pattern in your result that can tell us a message in terms of like countries which are more, I mean, you complete the sentence. I don't know. Do you see anything?
Yeah, showed the trends in the final part of the presentation, saying that about technical, there was a comment about the technical and social efficiency that are not necessarily linked, but in our case, the countries that resulted to be technical efficient were also social efficient, but is not true the reverse.
But can you give an example that I better understand?
Yeah.
In this context, what do you mean between the technical efficiency and social efficiency?
So the technical efficiency was the step in which we used capital and labor as inputs. and we evaluated the efficiency of countries in the exploitation of these traditional resources in producing well-being.
So that is in producing well-being. Okay.
Yeah, in producing well-being. And this was the technical efficiency. The social efficiency is the step in which we measured the efficiency of countries in the exploitation of socioeconomic and environmental costs in producing well-being. So the difference is in the input metrics.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was saying, yeah.
So I think that's clear. And actually, I wanted to interject here for a moment. I warned you that this would be a very practitioner-oriented group, and instead we actually get all the technical questions. So sorry for that. But also thank you for handling that. I wanted to ask about that social efficiency and how people are responding to it. I think that the idea itself is rather interesting to look at the BADs as inputs and see how efficient or inefficient we produce them, well-being given those level of inputs. Are people resonating with this? Have you had any feedback, current citations or other presentations? Do people like this idea? It seems novel to me.
Do you mean about the way we're measuring social efficiency?
Yes. So this concept of social efficiency for me is an interesting one that I haven't seen before. So you have, bad inputs, and so we would want to minimize them and still produce well-being. Do people like this?
There's a huge trend of literature about these bad outputs that are these what we can call in economics negative externalities. In fact, I also wrote another article all about the bad outputs and these socioeconomic and environmental costs and how to introduce them in India, because there are authors that consider them as inputs, authors that consider them as outputs because they think they are just unavoidable consequence of the good production. And there are also people that just cut them out from the analysis because they don't want to maximize them as normal outputs.
Sure.
Yeah, so there are scholars with different thoughts about this. And it's just about the interest of the researcher. He wants to measure. In this case, we cut them out from the previous output metrics because we're not interested in their maximization. But we used it in this step and thinking that measuring the efficiency in the exploitation of these social costs in producing well-being could be described as a social efficiency.
Mm-hmm. So it is, like I said, rather interesting, and I guess I just am not as familiar with the DEA world as I should be. So good to hear.
And I've tried to say something about DEA, but I know that if someone's not familiar, everything cannot be everything clear.
Sure. Panagiatis.
Thank you again. Just a couple of questions for a couple of suggestions and another comment. The first is about the concept of social efficiency you mentioned. It's the first time I see this type of social efficiency in which we consider quality of life outputs as the actual outputs and quality of life bad outputs as the inputs. But I'm sure you know it. There is another literature that looks at the social efficiency as how wealth, so income or related variables, is translated into quality of life variables. This is also called social efficiency. There is a couple of very nice papers about this. I will share one example in the chat. So these basically use the income or related variables, GDP or some other variables, and use this as an input and then check how countries are efficient. So how well are countries using this input, which is their income, to provide quality of life to their citizens. And this concept of social efficiency is linked with the idea of development relating back to Amartya Sen and how the GDP should be treated ideally as an input to the human development process, etc., etc. And I don't know if, Casey, this is something that resonates with your view of the concept. Yeah, I should. Yeah.
Thank you. It's not that I have a specific view. I think that there could be lots of different ways to measure efficiency. So this is another approach that I think makes sense. So thank you for sharing the resource.
And the couple of suggestions. No, the first was a question about, you mentioned that you wanted to reduce the dimensionality, and you used the PCA for that. So you had, I don't know how many were the good inputs. I think they were 6 or 7. I'm not sure. And you reduced it to 4.
No, the good inputs were 18.
18, okay.
Because among the 24 variables of the Better Life Index, there are 6 bad outputs. So 18 reduced to 4 dimensions.
Okay, I understand. I'm sure that you know it, but I would suggest in the future that you could also look to not reducing them by means of PCA, but using some other kind of introducing restrictions in the weights. I don't know if you use some kind of restrictions in the weights. I did not check this. I did not see this. But
no, I didn't hear.
This is something you could use also to avoid don't allow countries to assign 0 weights here and there. You want, in this concept of social efficiency, all the countries should attach some kind of positive weight, should take into account all the possible outputs. And another suggestion as an avenue for future work could be the exploitation of the directional distance function, as the other colleague mentioned, that instead of, let's say, dropping the bad outputs, you could consider them as outputs, but bad outputs, and model this through this directional distance function. So you have your inputs, as in the previous case, but now the countries try to maximize the good outputs and minimize the bad outputs. And there are approaches that model this in the concept of composite indicators or in the concept of DEA itself that you could use in just some suggestions.
No, that's a really good point. Thank you. Also because there's strong, really huge strand of literature that is consolidated about this kind of DEA.
Thank you.
So we are approaching the end. I think if there are no other questions, I might ask one last one. Let's see here. So I think, Gabriella, it's kind of for me, it's a little bit of a challenging question. If I understood correctly, you define sustainable countries as efficient countries. And but it's also relative efficiency. So and one of the things you said is that a benefit of the DEA is that we're not going to some sort of ideal, we're going to what currently exists. But then if we don't agree, maybe we agree that we don't yet have any sustainable countries, using some alternative definition, then we're actually constraining ourselves to what the current technology, and the goal would be for sustainability, I think, to go beyond the current level. Is there anything we can do about that? How do you feel about the restriction that we're really just looking at relative efficiency and trying to talk about something that goes beyond? We want sustainability that goes beyond current technology.
Yeah, you have a point here, because that's one of the cons of using DEA, but it's also a way of looking at something that is concrete. I mean, if someone is doing its best with this current level of well-being and with its current level of resources, with its technology, maybe it is feasible also for other countries. So they have peers they can look at to improve and to reach efficiency and hence sustainability.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you got a clap from Ashley in response, I think. So it's something tangible that we can work towards. I think that is a good answer. So with that, looks like I think we'll shut it down. Gabriella, if you have any last words for us, now's the time.
Maybe Anajot is trying to say something because I can see a message in the chat.
Yeah, it says there are some approaches in DEA to model a frontier that is beyond the frontier currently realized, I guess, by DEA. So it's maybe an extension to the standard approach. In response to my previous comment about technology that we haven't yet realized. Otherwise, I think I would say thank you very much for your fascinating talk, and also for the participants, for their participation, and Panagiatis for your questions as well as Golnaz.
Thanks to you for your invitation and for the nice chat, because it's always interesting to talk about something we're interested in.
Yep, great. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Bye.